Previously on Manzikert, a Greek noble, Alfricos, working in tandem with the surviving groups of Knights of Adana, has begun a rebellion against Karolos in central Italy. Hearing that the son of Emperor Gregorios was still alive, and had a powerful ally in King Stephen of Hungary, many of Karolos' soldiers began defecting to Alfricos. Meanwhile, Manuel and most of the imperial army was working with the Republic of Venice to invade Hungary. They had laid siege to Ragusa, the wealthy mercantile city where Zachary and Alfricos were staying. Manuel knew time was not on his side. On the one hand, it would be great if this invasion forced King Stephen to call off the siege of Constantinople. On the other, that meant over 30,000 troops would be marching towards him. He wanted to storm Ragusa quickly. However, the city had a large stockpile of food and supplies. They could withstand a long siege. Fortunately, the Doge of Venice, Domenico Michel, had a plan. One of his agents inside the city connected him to a woman named Flaminia. Not only had she grown up in Venice, but she was locked into a toxic marriage with a husband she hated. A husband who happened to be Ragusa's garrison commander. The Doge promised Flaminia that he would execute her husband, appoint one of her sons as ruler of Ragusa, and make her rich beyond her wildest dreams, if she would betray the city. Flaminia agreed. She revealed the existence of a secret postern in Ragusa's walls. This hidden door was unknown even to her husband. One of his lieutenants who she fancied had took her there one day, so they could be alone together. It was completely unguarded. She offered to unlock the postern on a predetermined night, which would allow Manuel and several of his best soldiers to sneak inside the city. Manuel and the Doge agreed to this plan, telling Flaminia to open the postern on the next new moon. Inside the city, Zachary and Alfricos lived in their own medium-sized house, donated to them by King Stephen. A half-dozen Hungarian bodyguards patrolled the building. Despite Ragusa now being under siege, Zachary was not worried. He felt confident in the city's ability to defend itself long enough for Stephen to return and annihilate Manuel's army. In the meantime, he bought a number of books to give to Alfricos. Some of these books are about philosophy, some were the Bible, and some were about history. Alfricos took a liking to the classics, reading all of Cicero, Julius Caesar's commentaries, and Marcus Aurelius' meditations. He and Zachary passed the time by talking about what they had read. Sometimes, Zachary felt Alfricos was smarter and even more well-read than he was. He was amazed by Alfricos' genius. A few days later, it was now the night of the next new moon. Just as promised, Flaminia left the postern open. Manuel and 30 of his best soldiers stealthily traveled under the cover of darkness, entering the city without making a sound. They quietly killed a number of the city's guards before opening the gates and sending the signal for the rest of the army to attack. The Romans and Venetians then poured through the open gate, storming Ragusa. They began to sack the city. The commotion woke Zachary up from his sleep. He got up to see what was happening, and then immediately sprung into action, putting on his armor and grabbing his sword. As he did this, several Roman soldiers tried breaking into the house. After some time, they managed to overwhelm the Hungarian bodyguards. Zachary woke up Alfricos, telling the child to stay behind him. The Romans entered the room. Zachary was outnumbered and fighting with only half a night's worth of sleep. As he drew his sword, he feared this might be the end. But just then, several more men entered the house. It was Wilfred, the captain of Gregorius' old Varangian guard, together with a few of his fellow veteran Varangians. Wilfred explained to Zachary that although Manuel had managed to wipe out most of the Varangian guard after Gregorius' death, he and a few others managed to escape. At first, they spent their days traveling up northern Italy, having decided to leave the Roman Empire for good and return to their homelands in northern Europe. But upon hearing that the son of Gregorios was alive, they decided to set out in search of Alfricos and serve him. En route to Ragusa, they met a Moroccan smuggler named Shamir al-Dani. For a good price, he snuck them into Ragusa only a few days before Manuel's army arrived. They had tried to contact Zachary, but the Hungarian guards protecting his house had never let them in. When they saw the city had fallen, and Manuel's troops were about to break into the house, they sprung into action. Zachary thanked Wilfred for rescuing them, before the group, again utilizing the smuggling skills of Shamir al-Dani, escaped the city on a small skiff. Al-Dani dropped them off in the countryside a few dozen miles away, before hurrying off to his next mission, which he boasted was given to him by an extremely wealthy and powerful patron. After securing Ragusa, one of Manuel's soldiers came to him with good news and bad news. The good news: the army had seized a huge stockpile of supplies from the city, including by far the largest supply of oil and pitch he had ever seen. The bad news: Zachary and Alfricos were nowhere to be found. They had gotten away. Alfricos and his protectors set up camp far away from the city before deciding the best course of action to take. Zachary thought that they should ride for King Stephen and join his army. Alfricos would be safest there. A few Varangians agreed with him. Wilfred, however, claimed that the best place to go was none other than the eternal city of Rome. Many of the soldiers remaining there were loyalists to Gregorios, and already a number of them had joined Eleftherios' rebellion. It was only a matter of time before they captured Rome from Karolos. Wilfred argued that Alfricos was safest in the hands of his father's own soldiers, not in the custody of a foreign king, even if that foreign king was family. The group was at an impasse. Eventually, they decided to let Alfricos decide. The young boy made his decision quickly. They were going to Rome. Wilfred's prediction about Karolos losing Rome turned out to be prescient. As Eleftherios' army swelled to 7,000, he began marching to Rome with the intent on besieging the city. Karolos knew most of his remaining soldiers were likely to defect if he stayed. He took his 500 most loyal men and fled the city through a secret tunnel under the cover of night. The people of Rome then opened the gates for Eleftherios, who entered the city and declared himself, his army, and the eternal city of Rome as now under the control of Emperor Alfricos.